Hello, everyone. I'm Catenya McHenry, Communications Director here at the McCombs School of Business, and you are joining us today on our work from home edition of our Big Ideas Show, where we delve deeper into faculty research happening here at the McCombs School of Business. Joining us today is Amit Kumar. He's Assistant Professor in our Marketing Department, and today we're talking about his brand new paper called Spending on Doing Promotes More Moment-to-Moment Happiness, the Spending on Having. Welcome to the program today, Amit. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. I wish we were together in person, but this works pretty well, I think.
Yeah, it's just nice to see people's faces. They're being
and to hear people's voices. I feel like the house is so quiet that.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about your paper. So it really focuses on spending money on experiences rather than on objects. So tell me a little bit of background about your research and what your motivation was for even wanting to research the topic.
Sure. So I've actually spent several years sort of thinking about this broad topic of how people spend their money and how that can influence how they feel. And so the particular distinction that I've been focused on has to do with, as you mentioned, experiential and material purchases. So that's sort of money that you spend on doing, so on things like outdoor activities and recreation, tickets to events, travel to places, which is unfortunately restricted at the moment, versus money that you spend on having. So that's on things, on stuff like clothing and accessories and jewelry, furniture, electronic goods, things like that. And so in a lot of our work, we've sort of already found that people derive more happiness from their experiences than their possessions. When they're sort of looking back on them and when they're looking forward to the experiences that they're going to have. What we were interested in here is that happiness is this term that can be defined in lots of ways, and so how robust is a result like this? One thing that people have thought about is sort of this distinguishing between what they call anticipatory utility, experienced utility, and remembered utility. And so we've sort of focused on anticipatory and remembered utility. What we were interested in here is what about the happiness that comes sort of in the here and now when you're actually consuming something that you spent money on. So that's what sort of motivated the research that we conducted here.
We kind of have had to redefine how we achieve happiness. So can you talk a little bit about how you would adapt your research to where we are and the time frame that we're in?
Yeah, obviously it's a tough time. People don't have lots of money to spend. One thing that we are all really hopeful for is that this isn't going to last too long. Hope it's going to last as long as it takes for us to sort of be safe again. But as I was sort of alluding to earlier, sort of the real takeaway of a lot of this research is that it's social stuff that makes you happy. And so this is a time when this term social distancing is being used. I think physical distancing is probably a more appropriate term to use. We do need to maintain space between us and other people, but you can do things like this, have Zoom conversations, video chats over FaceTime or Skype or all these other resources that we have. That's probably going to make you happier than some other types of like online shopping that you could be doing now.
I like shopping too.
Yeah, I guess looking back at some of that earlier research as well, there's this benefit of sort of looking back on experiences that you've had and looking forward to experiences that you're going to have as well. And so this is a time when you can chat with other people that you have traveled with in the past and sort of reminisce about those memories. That is likely to make you happy as well. Certainly, I can think back to revisit a delicious meal I had in Barcelona or the time I hiked at Machu Picchu, things like that. If you're having conversations about that, that's going to make you feel good. You can also start planning, I think, some of the experiences that you'll engage in once this is all over. Just thinking about that and talking to other people about what you'll do when the time comes is also a potential source of happiness right now.
And one of the things that you've talked about is the reasoning behind some of your research, and you talked about something called social value. So how would that apply to where we are now and looking forward to, like, going somewhere or even having a conversation with someone in this format, the Zoom format or Teams format, or however you're reaching out to people, or even FaceTime. Talk a little bit about the value of that from a social standpoint.
Yeah, so obviously we're very concerned about our physical health right now, given everything that's going on. It turns out that our psychological health is really important as well and related to our physical health. So there's really interesting research from epidemiologists, for example, that loneliness, when you look at the relationship between loneliness and things like morbidity and mortality, it's similar to like smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It can be more problematic than things that we care a lot about, like obesity and air pollution. We work hard to prevent those things. We need to be working hard to prevent loneliness as well. And so experiences are a way to connect with other people. One way that you can use your money to advance your social connections. But social connections more broadly are going to be beneficial for our mental health, for our psychological well-being. One of the other things that I'm working on now that hopefully we'll talk about it sometime in the future is how we connect with other people. So the fact that we're talking right now is really meaningful. We could do other things. We could send emails back and forth. We could send text messages. But connecting with our voices in this way, using things like Zoom and Skype and FaceTime and all of these tools that we have available, that's going to enhance our sense of connection more than other ways that we might connect with each other.
How do you think the coronavirus will shift just how we, in new ways, define happiness?
Well, I do think we'll probably be even more appreciative of some of these experiences that we can't have right now. So certainly I feel super grateful and lucky that I've been able to engage in the travel that I've engaged in over my life, or to see these bands in concerts or theater performances or eat at amazing restaurants. Once we can do those things again, I think it might even feel even better. We might appreciate them more than we would otherwise. But we do already appreciate those things a lot. We did before this, and I think we will again after this as well.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much for joining us today, Amit. This has been so great. Well, Amit's paper, again, is called Spending on Doing Promotes More Moment-to-Moment Happiness and Spending on Having. And we will have a link there in the bottom. Thank you again for joining us today on our Big Idea Show, Work from Home Edition. We will see you next time.